My name is Jean Morris. I'm a local author and I've written a number of books about the history of Widnes. I was born in Widnes in October 1942, which makes me just over 80 years of age. And when I was born, Widnes was still part of Lancashire prior to the change of the boundaries in 1974. So I'm a Lancashire lass. I suppose the earliest memories of the area are of it being a sort of like a dirty, smoky, smelly place, because at that time when I was young, when I was a child, we had a lot of chemical factories here, and obviously there was a lot of environmental pollution. So it was quite notorious really as being a smelly kind of a place. Well, my earliest memory is the first day I started at nursery school, which was when I was about 4, which is a long time ago. I can remember being taken to nursery with my mother and screaming the place down because I didn't want to stay there. My mother left me, but there was a series of windows in the nursery. It was like a long prefabricated building, and there was about 8 or 9 windows, and I'd just been calmed down by one of the nursery assistants, and my mother was peeping through the windows as she was walking along, which started me off again, screaming and crying. But eventually I settled in. Other memories of childhood, I suppose, things that have changed, with the fact that not many people had cars. And most people used the buses, and there were lots of buses around. And then, of course, we had the awful fogs, which was, exacerbated by the fact that it was a smoky town. So we had smogs where you couldn't see your hand in front of your face, and you could hardly walk across the road because you couldn't see where you were going. Then, of course, entertainment. Like most people went to the cinema 2 or 3 times a week because most people didn't have televisions. So there were long queues outside cinemas every evening, round the block, queues and queues of people waiting to get into the cinema. Children played out, and you didn't have iPads and computer games and things like that. Children would be out in the streets skipping and playing hopscotch, and boys with marbles on the pavements and things like that. Oh, and ice cream men coming round with a bike. They didn't have ice cream vans. He had a bike with a container on the front filled with ice, and that was the ice cream man. He'd come and sound a horn outside the street. Washing day, I can remember going to my grandmother's, and washing day was on a Monday, once a week. Not like today where we have the washing machine going every day. My grandmother would wash on a Monday, as did my mother. But my grandmother had an outhouse with a boiler in, and she'd light a fire under the boiler. And all the white linen, the bed linen, would be boiling all day long with soda, washing soda. And the washing was so white and clean. But no washing machine. She had a tub with a dolly peg that she used to put in and agitate, and a washing board where she'd scrub with carbolic soap to get stains out of things. And it was a day-long process from morning till about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. She'd be washing and washing, and she'd be judging the neighbours by the whiteness of the washing. She'd say, "Mrs. So-and-so over the back, she's not a very good washer. Have you seen the stains on her towels?" So things like that I can remember from childhood. Just simple things. The change in the way of life, shopping habits. I mean, people shopped every day because they didn't have a fridge or a freezer. So housewives would go out every morning and do the shop for the day. And people had pantries with a a marble stone inside, and it was dark, and it would keep butter and milk and things cool. So changes have been profound, really. Well, in Widnes particularly, if you go back to the start of the chemical industry in the 1840s, when Widnes was actually just a collection of small hamlets and villages, then you had the influx of the chemical industry, which brought huge increase in population. And that population came from different places, but they were all sort of like housed in different communities, and all the houses were built alongside the factories so that people of a certain nationality or religion tended to congregate together. So every community became like a village, and you didn't sort of mix with other people. So community was important. You would travel perhaps to Liverpool or to Warrington or somewhere, but you'd hardly ever go to Manchester because that was too far away. Wherever you travel, because you didn't have transport, only public transport, you'd only go within a certain area. People didn't have a sort of a broad outlook because it was a confined community, if you like. Community was important. Your neighbours were important, whereas these days, I mean, I've lived in this house for 50 years and people have come and gone, and I know everybody by sight, but there are people that's lived here a couple of doors away maybe for 10 years, and I don't know what their surnames are. I just wave to them and say hello. Whereas years ago, it was tight communities. And I mean, especially in these districts where there were little terraced houses, you know, and in Widnes there were a lot of districts that were, you know, if you came from one district, you had something in common with everybody. You didn't know people that lived in other districts. So community was important. When I've written books about Widnes and I've talked to people older than me, people who lived in these small communities that were cleared because of slum clearance. They were housed in new houses with bathrooms and, you know, they were delighted with the houses, but they mourned the passing of communities. They'd lived alongside people for, you know, families had lived there for generations, and suddenly these new housing schemes were developed, which were a good thing, but they broke up communities, and people found it very, very hard to rebuild that kind of feeling that the old communities had. So even though there was progress, in some ways there was a lot of regret. If we look at modern days, I suppose the demise of heavy industry and the growth in population, they're the two principal factors that have driven change, I suppose, in Halton. I mean, if we look back to the late 1950s and early 1960s, there was a massive influx of people from Liverpool into Widnes. When they had the slum clearance programmes in Liverpool, they sent people out to Kirby and to Speke and to places like that. And then, I think it was the early 60s, they built an estate at Widnes near Hough Green, the Upton estate. In the region of about 18,000 people came into Widnes from Liverpool. So that changed the ethos of society, because we had an influx of people from somewhere else. Society has changed because we've broadened our outlook, if you like. We've experienced things that our parents didn't experience, that they couldn't have imagined. So society's changed because we've been exposed to different things, but also the influence of people coming in. I mean, we've got a lot of Polish people in the town at the minute, and we've got people from Ukraine and people from other parts of the world. So society is more diverse. When we look back at the history of Widnes and Halton which includes Runcorn. Well, particularly from the mid-19th century, from the 1840s onwards, we've always been host to people from other places. And the town is a collection of people who are descended from migrants. The main population, the majority of people in the town, are descended from migrants. Whichever period you look at, there's always been migration. People build up communities of their own sort, don't they? But these days, it's hard to say what your own sort is because we're all so diverse and we're intermingled together. We're all influenced by experiences and people that we meet. So if you're living in a limited area, sort of sphere, you've got a limited idea of what community is and sense of place.
So do you think it's important that we find out about other people's perspectives?
Absolutely, yeah. And because, the world is so small these days, isn't it? That we need to embrace other cultures and other ways of life. It's like going back to the 1950s. I mean, we all had, meat and 2 veg every Sunday for our dinner, or hot pot on a Monday, or whatever. But as people came in from other places, we embraced new experiences and products and dishes from other parts of the world. We were happy to go to a Chinese restaurant or an Indian restaurant or Thai restaurants, Japanese restaurants. Years ago, you couldn't have imagined that. But because we're open to different experiences now, the world is not as big as we thought it was. We've all travelled, we've all been places that, our parents couldn't even have imagined. It's all, contributed to the way we think about other people and about where they come from, which is a good thing, isn't it, really? And I think because a place like Widnes particularly, I think we should embrace people that come in because we're all the descendants of immigrants. 99% of people in Widnes descend from immigrants from somewhere. So we should embrace new people coming in, give them a chance. I'm a pretty newbie when it comes to immigrants into Widnes because my family have only been here a little over 100 years, which is nothing in the history of time. My grandparents came to England from Ireland in late 1915, I think it was November or December 1915, with their 4 little boys. The eldest, I think, was 13 or 14, and my dad was born in Widnes the following summer. So he was the first generation of our family to be born here in England. My grandparents came here from Carrick-on-Suir in 1915. I don't quite know why they came here because my granddad had a reasonably good job in Carrick. He worked in the bank and he came to Widnes and he worked in a chemical factory as a timekeeper. He had 2 first cousins in Liverpool, Martin and Hannah Cody. And Martin was a Roman Catholic priest and he had a parish in Kirkdale. And his sister Hannah was his housekeeper. So, as I say, they came over and I think they stayed for a short while with Martin and Hannah. And then they moved to Widnes. Martin, my granddad's cousin, was killed during the May Blitz in 1941 in Liverpool. His church was hit by a bomb and he was killed instantly. My granddad came to Widnes and they lived in a house in Market Street. And in June the following year, my dad was born in Widnes. When my dad and his brothers were young, they used to be taken back home every year during the summer holidays. My grandmother would take them and they'd spend time in Carrick-on-Suir. And I remember one of my uncles telling me that he cried every night for years. He couldn't get used to it, and he didn't like the smell of the town, and he thought everywhere was dirty. He actually ran away at one time and stowed away on a ship. I think he was about 11. He made his way back to Carrick-on-Suir, and his grandmother found him in the outhouse with the hens. My mother was Irish as well, and she came over and she went into service in a hotel at Lynn, and she used to come to Widnes to visit her sister, and she met my dad at a dance, and of course they clicked. They married in 1941 and I was born in October 1942. So I'm the product of Irish immigrants. Being a Widnesian was what you were rather than Irish or Lithuanian, even though you had an appreciation of your heritage and where you come from, and you perhaps were proud of that. At the same time, you'd become part of the general population and you thought of yourself as a Widnesian rather than anything else. And I think, that's the way society gradually changed. People appreciate their heritage and they're proud of their heritage. And so they should be, really. Those are the people that made us who we are.